Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today on finding private accommodation from first steps to moving in. My name is Rav Purewal, I'm from the University of London Housing Services. The purpose of this talk is to give you all an overview of the process of looking for private accommodation. This talk will be around 40 to 45 minutes and there will be a Q&A at the end. By the end of this webinar, you should have a better understanding of where and how to look for accommodation, what to expect from the process, and how to avoid problems and scams. What we do as a service, we help you find accommodation. So please visit our website as we have our property platform where landlords post properties, they're available for students. We also have events such as a flatmate finder. Unfortunately, you may have missed the one we held yesterday, but we do hold these throughout the year. So please check our website, which you will see below, housing.london.ac.uk/events. We also put information on there of future webinars such as this ones, which you can attend. We also offer contract checking. So when you do find a property, we can check the contract for you before signing to make sure everything is legal and there's no unfair terms. And once you are living in the property, if you ever need housing advice, for example, there's disrepair issues and the landlord's not fixing them, or the landlord's trying to charge you extra fees, we can advise you on these. Please save the date for tomorrow. We've got our annual housing fair tomorrow. This will be a big event in person at Senate House. And this is where you'll have the opportunity to meet reputable providers, estate agents, private halls, and other housing services. This will be your opportunity to ask questions, check the market price range, and of course, there will be freebies. So please attend. Okay, so when we start thinking about accommodation, there are some initial factors to consider. Types of accommodation, budgeting. Budgeting is very important because you want to be able to ensure that you can afford to live in a property, because once you sign a contract, you are bound by that contract. Next, you would need to consider the type of flatmates you want to live with. Sometimes, we may feel, oh, we've got good friends and they'll be good to share with. Sometimes, however, that is not the case. You need to try and find flatmates who have similar values to you. For example, if you're somebody who doesn't like to have late night parties every weekend and you'd rather live in a more quiet environment, you'd want to try and find someone and someone or some people on similar thinking. And also location is very important where considering where you would like to rent a property. As we all know, central London is very expensive, and you would also want to consider areas outside of London based on your affordability. You would also need to consider things that are around you. For example, if you're somebody who needs regular medication, you might want to find somewhere that has a pharmacy nearby. Sometimes it's not just about the property, you really need to consider the wider area, what's best for you. Okay, what are the options when looking for a property? Flats and houses will be the main focus of this presentation, where you could rent a whole flat or a house. There are also private halls, which are similar to university halls, but as they run privately, they generally tend to be a little bit more expensive. And the other option is resident landlords. This is where you can be living in someone's house and the landlord's living in the property or renting a room. This is often cheaper. However, you have to bear in mind when it comes to how sociable you want to be, and there will be restrictions because you will be living with the landlord. However, the one good thing about this is if there's any disrepair issues, the landlord will most likely want to get the repairs done straight away because they're also living in the property. Okay, so shared flats and houses. This is the most preferred options for most students. On average, there are around 3 to 5 students living in one property. This is generally cost effective because you are sharing the bills, you are sharing the rent. However, what I want to emphasize to you all today is joint liability. When signing a contract, a joint tenancy agreement, joint liability applies to all. So let's say, for example, 4 of you rent a property, which is £2,000 a month. That's £500 per month each. If one person decides if one person stops paying, the landlord can seek the rent from any one of the other tenants. So in effect, if one person doesn't pay, that means everyone's not paying. So please bear in mind, that also includes if something's broken, you have joint liability for everything. Again, please look at our property platform. This is free for all of you to sign up. The properties on there would have been checked to make sure the landlord is the property. Relevant safety certificates are provided, such as gas safety certificate, electrical safety certificate, and you're able to search by proximity to your university. So it's a great tool all for you to use. We do have a Flatmate Finder Facebook group. Please feel free to join. And this is where students often advertise, for example, they may be in a tenancy agreement and they need someone to join that property. It's a great way to meet new people and hopefully you can find a property. Where else you can look? Spare Room is established house share group similar to Facebook. Can be a fee to reply to ads, so please bear that in mind. You also have, but these it's generally off on Spare Room. It's just for room only. You won't get, you may do, but in most cases it is just for one room rather than a whole property. Rightmove, Zoopla, and Open Rent allow you to rent the whole property. This is the most common most students use. And there's also Gumtree, which offer free listings for whole properties and rooms. However, there have been known to be scams when people use Gumtree. Not everything's a scam, but it's best to be wary. If the best advice I can give you all is, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. As I said earlier, it's very important to ensure that when you find a property, that you calculate if you can afford the property, including the rent. You need to consider household bills, especially as bills have gone up this year. Your food, leisure, we all love Netflix and Disney Plus, so you need to include that. And remember, you're all signing when you do find a property and sign a tenancy agreement, it will be for a whole term. Most private rented terms in the UK are around a year. So if you sign a year tenancy, you are liable for that whole year. Be cautious. If an landlord asks to do a money transfer, we advise to be extremely careful because this can't be traced. And it's best to seek advice because you don't want to be scammed out of your money. A lot of agents, especially since COVID, have put virtual viewings. Now, if possible, I advise you all to go for viewing, like view the property yourselves. The problem with online viewings is that agents can easily hide the things you don't want to see. And please bear in mind, if something has gone wrong in the property in the past, for example, let's say there was loads of mold or pest infestation, agents don't have to tell you about past issues. So it is better for you to go there, view the property yourself, and have these questions. You can ask an agent, for example, oh, in the past, has there been any issues of damp, mold, pest infestation? But also when you view the property yourself, you can look out for these things. You can look in the corners. Is there signs of damp, mold, pest infestation? If the landlord or agent promises to fix something, when you, let's say, for example, you do notice some mold and the landlord or agent says, oh, I'm going to fix this before you sign the contract, try to get that promise in writing. What to look out for when you're in a property, viewing for properties, smoke alarms. Every property must have a smoke alarm. And if there's gas in the property, there must be a carbon monoxide alarm. If you can't see these, ask where it is. Again, damp or mold patches, a sign of infestation. If you see any wires hanging around, like hanging loosely, which doesn't look right, don't hesitate to ask the question, ask why is that wire hanging out. A top tip I give students when they're in a property, ask the person showing you the property if you can use the toilet. It may sound silly to you all, but just by asking to use the toilet, you can go in, you can flush the toilet to make sure that it's working okay. You can test the taps to make sure there's good water flow, and you can switch on the light to make sure there's electricity. Again, anything you see that doesn't look right, don't be afraid to ask questions. So with regards to agents, which most of you will deal with when finding properties, all agents must be part of a redress scheme. So as you can see on the slide, we got the property redress scheme, the property ombudsman and safe agent. So if you ever have a issue with the agent and you feel like they're doing something that they shouldn't be, you've tried you followed the complaint process and you haven't got anywhere, you can contact the redress scheme who will investigate your concerns. No more fees. This is something that was a good thing that was enacted. So agents and landlords can no longer charge most admin fees. So in the past, an agent might say, oh, we need to charge you X amount to draft a tenancy agreement and so on. That is all prohibited. So if you, for example, if a landlord says, oh, with the inventory, you need to pay for this, or the requirement for you to pay for professional cleaning, they can no longer do that. If you ever come across a situation where you think this fee doesn't seem right, please contact us for advice. I must state that there are some fees that landlords and agents can charge. For example, if you lose your key, or if you want to swap a tenant, let's say, for example, one of your tenants really have to leave the tenancy, but you have found someone who can take their place and the landlord will accept this. Please remember, landlords don't have to, but if they do, they can charge you a fee. If you do want to end the contract sooner, unfortunately, most landlords will ask for a fee. And if you, for some reason, unable to pay the rent after 2 weeks, they can charge interest, which is capped at 3%. Okay, so you found you found a property that you really like, you want to go ahead. At this point, the agent will most likely ask for a holding fee. What a holding fee is when someone pays the agent or landlord to say, I want this property, please take it off the market. It secures your interest in the property, but this does not mean you're guaranteed to get it. So with holding deposits, they can only charge you 1 week's rent. If you do change your mind, so let's say you've paid the 1 week's holding fee, a week or two later, you decide actually the property is not for me, I've changed my mind, it'll be very hard to get that money back. So it's quite important, if you can, to view the property and only pay the holding fee if you're absolutely certain you want this property. If the landlord is the one who decides he doesn't want to go to head, you got more chance of getting the money back. However, this all depends on reference checks, which I'm going to go through. So with things like reference checks, this comes under additional requirements that the agent will do. So they'll check you have the right to rent, guarantors. Please bear in mind, for most international students, it'll be very hard to provide a guarantor. So the agent or landlord may ask you to pay the whole term rent upfront, which they are legally allowed to do so. However, we advise to try, if they do say, we want you to pay, let's say it's a year agreement and they want you to pay upfront, try and negotiate and say that I can pay 6 months upfront, but the remaining 6 months I'll pay month by month. Please, as I was saying earlier with the holding fee, let's say, for example, you don't have the right to rent, but you told them you did, for example, they can say that we're going to keep the holding deposit. So please be honest. And if you have any concerns, please contact us for advice. Now, with regards to your contract, please, before signing, read it carefully. Again, we can read it for you. We seek advice from us. You want to make sure that you understand all the key terms. For example, the rent you're going to pay per month, the length of the term, your responsibilities, the landlord's responsibilities, and also if there's a break clause. Now, for those who have never heard of a break clause is, for example, halfway through, you could have a term in the contract which allows it to end early. So let's say, for example, you sign a year tenancy agreement, you may want a break clause at 6 months. So that means once the 6 month comes, you can walk away from the agreement and not suffer a penalty. However, please bear in mind, this is a two-way thing. The landlord can also serve notice of 6 months instead of the year. So if you are someone who wants that flexibility, then ask for a break clause. However, if you're someone who you're adamant you want to stay there for a fixed term, you want that security, then don't ask for a break clause. In most cases, you will be asked to pay a damage deposit. This is a security against the property. Landlords cannot ask for more than 5 weeks rent unless it's the annual rent is over 50,000, then they can ask for 6 weeks rent. This is paid around the time you sign the contract. And once you pay the money to the agent or the landlord, they have a duty to protect it under the schemes, which I will go through next slide. The general rule with regarding deposits is it will be refunded to you at the end of the agreement unless the landlord and agent can prove that you have done something against the agreement. For example, you accidentally damage something in the property, but unless the landlord can prove that it was as a result of a tenant's negligence, the money will go back to the tenants at the end of the agreement. So there are 3 deposit protection schemes. We have TDS, the tenancy deposit scheme, my deposit, and DPS, the deposit protection scheme. The agent or landlord has to inform you within 30 days that it has been protected under these schemes. When you on your contract, it should state which scheme it is under. Again, if 30 days have passed and you have not been informed, please contact us for advice. Because if they do fail to protect the deposit within 30 days, you can take them to court for 1 to 3 times the value of the deposit plus the deposit back. So you've found your flatmates at this point, you found your property, you've paid your deposit and rent, and now you've moved in. Great news. First thing I advise you all to do, one of the first things is read the meters. So there should be a gas meter, electric meter. Straight away, take a picture of the meter reading, contact the supplier. If you're not sure who the energy supplier is, ask the landlord or agent. For example, if it's with British Gas, contact British Gas straight away. Say, I've moved in today, I'd like to set up a new account. This is the meter reading that this is showing. This is very important because you don't want to be paying for the previous tenant's bill. So try to do this on the first day you move in. For everyone who is a full-time student, you are exempt from council tax. So if in your property, if everyone is a full-time student, you are exempt from council tax. So contact your local authority and advise that you are all full-time students. However, if one person is not a full-time student, then you will be liable to pay council tax, but in most instances, it will be reduced by 25%. Take photos of everything. The slightest damage you see, take a photo straight away. And send it via email to the landlord or agent. In most instances, landlords and agents love WhatsApp, but the problem with WhatsApp is they can easily delete messages. So if you can, send everything via email because it'll be in your sent box, date and time stamped, or send it via text messaging. So any communications via text messages. They may provide an inventory, which is a report of the state of the property. Please read it carefully. If there's anything you disagree with, raise it straight away. Now, there may be instances where someone has to leave early. Please, if you are in this situation, ask the landlord for permission. If you just leave, you are still liable for the rent. You may be able to assign your tenancy. I briefly touched upon this earlier. So if you can find someone who can take over your part of the agreement and the landlord is happy to do so, then that'll be great news. But just remember, you are signing a legally binding contract for that fixed term. We have useful information on our websites for average rents and the cost of bills on our housing guide. Please bear in mind, though, that prices have recently changed, but this is a good indication of certain areas of how much you'll be paying for rent and utility bills and so on. Where you can get advice, of course, from us, please feel free to contact us. Your college student services team, Shelter England and Citizens Advice are also great resources for housing issues. Please take note of our contact details. We also have a Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, where we regularly put posts about housing issues that may be relevant to you. And please take note of tomorrow's housing fair. You don't want to miss it. Do we have any questions? I'm just going to read through the Q&A chat, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to speak up. One of the questions is about recording. Yes, this has been recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel soon. Somebody's asked a question about UCL and their guarantor scheme. Unfortunately, I'm unable to comment on that with regards to if they can increase the price. My advice will be to contact the housing team at UCL directly. Somebody's asked what's the valid break clause we can ask to put in the contract. A break clause can be included at any time. For example, I've seen agreements where after the first 2 months, a tenant or landlord can exercise a break clause. This is quite flexible. But again, ask yourself if that's what you want, because break clauses also allow the landlord to terminate an contract early. For example, 6 months in, landlord exercises a break clause, but actually you want to stay there for the whole term. So it's something to really consider with regards to break clause, because some people want that certainty that this is my property for 1 year, or some people don't know if they're going to be here for the whole year and want that flexibility. Somebody has asked, is it possible to ask for an apartment cleaning before moving in? You can ask for cleaning, but they do not have to. My advice here is, especially when moving in, and when you end when the contract ends, leave the property as you find it. So if it wasn't clean at all, then you don't have to then get professionally clean the property if it wasn't professionally cleaned in the first place. Please bear in mind, if the agent says, oh, we've professionally cleaned this, we've paid for a company, so we expect you to pay for professional cleaning at the end of the agreement, they cannot force you to do that. You have the ability to clean it yourself and leave it at a professional standard. They cannot force you to pay for professional cleaning. That goes against the Tenants Fees Act that I mentioned earlier. Got a question here regarding council tax. If 1 out of 2 tenants is not a student, what you mentioned, 25% reduction of council tax, is that for all tenants? So the council tax will apply to everyone that's living in that property. It may be reduced because you're a student. I would confirm this with your local authority, but the council tax applies to the property and not individuals. So you will all be liable in a sense for that council tax. Sorry, Aya, I can see your message here. Do you have any advice for exchange students specifically? Feel free to ask me a question if there's something specific you're thinking of. Hi, Aya, are you there? Feel free to message in the chat if you're unable to ask the question. I can see a question regarding virtual viewings. Is there any event for international, sorry. So some of our events, for example, this webinar are online, so please feel free to attend. I've got a question here. How many months before moving should you start looking? Look straight away. Property always become available. We generally advise around 2 months before when you're thinking of moving in, but there's no harm looking in before that. Got a question here regarding how quick properties turn around. That's quite a difficult one to answer. My advice to you is to keep looking. The housing fair will be at Senate House. It won't be online, unfortunately. Got a question here regarding applying to the UK before your master starts and to find a flat. Yes, if you can, that would be good because you'll be able to view the property yourself. Again, I don't want to scare anyone with online viewings. I'm not saying agents are going to deliberately lie to you or hide things. It's just for that extra peace of mind that you've seen the property yourself and you're happy with it. Thank you all for attending the webinar today. If you do have any further questions or any concerns, you need advice, please feel free to contact us. Wish you all the best in your property search.